What's the largest animal you can think of? Okay, that's probably too vague of a question. Your mind probably went straight to the oceans, picturing deep-sea leviathans like the mighty blue whale. Let's go a little bit closer, shall we? What about on land? What are the biggest animals that live up here with us above the water? Elephants, maybe? What about rhinos? Then again, hippos are up there too, in the same kind of ballpark, all pretty huge. What about cows? They can grow pretty big, right? Especially with all the crazy growth hormones that meat manufacturers pump into them these days. Well, what if there was something out there bigger than all of those? Imagine it. Some huge beast roaming the wilderness that easily towered above any creature you've ever seen in your life. This thing would be massive, striding across the world, towering above the meager height of a human being. Now, imagine that this thing, whatever it was, wasn't just big, but kept getting bigger. Sure, all of this might sound like the premise for the next Godzilla or Cloverfield movie, but while Big Charlie might not be the king of the monsters, it certainly lives up to that first part of its nickname. Of course, the SCP Foundation calls it SCP-4158. Big Charlie is just the playful nickname that the owners gave it, although none of them are sure who was the first to call the creature by that name. Standing on 4 long legs at 3.4 meters tall when the Foundation first discovered it, SCP-4158 was about 1 3/5 times as tall as famous professional basketball player Shaquille O'Neal. But since then, well, like we said, Big Charlie is getting bigger day by day. The creature appears to be tangentially related to the bovine family of mammals, essentially making it a ginormous cow. However, SCP-4158 lacks the facial structure and features that you might expect to see on the faces at your local farm. The creature has thin, translucent skin, which is so fragile that it often tears easily, and anyone observing SCP-4158 can often see the bones and internal organs within. Ugh. Gross. It possesses a large bulbous head with a protrusion at the front almost like a beak. As well as that, its huge eyes are foggy, a milky white color which seems to suggest that SCP-4158 is, at least, partially blind. The large cattle-like mammal is incredibly skinny, almost to the point where its bones stick out from underneath its skin. Its legs are longer than the rest of its colossal body and seem barely able to support the animal's weight. On description alone, you can't help but feel sorry for the poor creature and its sorry state of living. Normally, Big Charlie is mostly calm and docile, barely acknowledging the Foundation personnel that come to examine it, feed it, or clean its containment cell. Held in a heavy containment zone, SCP-4158 is fed through a 5-meter trough on the far east wall of its cell, surviving on a diet of raw beef, hay, wood, and bricks. Not the typical grass-only eating habits you'd expect from normal cows. But according to the Foundation's extensive testing on the creature, its diet doesn't seem to be what is causing SCP-4158 to keep growing at the rate it has been. The mass of Big Charlie is in some sort of state of perpetual increase, meaning its size and weight are always growing. And it is because of this continuous growth that every week the Foundation is forced to shear off great swaths of excess meat from the creature, cleaving off its flesh and incinerating the mass, all while Big Charlie is still alive. Now, before you start dialing PETA's hotline, it's also worth mentioning Big Charlie can't feel pain. What's more, testing has revealed that the meat taken from SCP-4158 is USDA Utility Grade beef, the kind that would normally come from older cattle. Utility grade meat has no fat marbling, so it isn't as tender or as flavorsome as other more premium grades, but would normally be used in canned and processed food products. And despite the Foundation destroying the excess that they cut off of Big Charlie as a precaution, in theory the meat is still good to eat and possesses no anomalous properties. Then again, would you really want to eat a burger made from SCP-4158? I didn't think so. If left unchecked and allowed to grow for longer than a week, SCP-4158 will begin to form new features, limbs, organs, and sometimes even genitals will sprout from random places all over its body. The previous record for Big Charlie's most substantial growth was when he increased to 8.5 meters tall. That's over 3/5 the height of the Hollywood sign and over 1.5 times the average height of a giraffe. At this immense size, Charlie has developed 7 legs, 4 stomachs, 3 tongues, and numerous other extremities before the SCP Foundation cut him back down to size. And we mean they literally cut him back down. So what exactly is this thing? It's like a giant cow, but not actually a cow, even though its flesh is identical to beef. And it's not a destructive, rampaging monster either, showing no hostility towards humans, even when they are shearing its excessive body mass away. Could it be some kind of failed genetic experiment? An attempt to solve hunger by engineering a creature that could not only stay alive, but keep growing after having its meat cut away? If that were true, it would make SCP-4158 a literal cash cow for the meat industry. Well, we've got kind of a funny story about that, actually. Big Charlie was first encountered by the Foundation back in December 2004 in Crewdson, Indiana. A number of calls had been made to the area's local animal control services, with reports of a large cow with mange roaming the nearby Highway 17. 2 officers belonging to the Animal Control Department were sent out to investigate these reports, and what they found was SCP-4158, wandering aimlessly, but unlike any cow they had ever seen. The officers called local police, where a Foundation plant caught wind of what they had found and called in containment specialists. The case was closed after the animal control officers were given amnestics, and a cover story was put in place about a cow with mange that was put down where it had been found. In reality, the SCP Foundation rounded up old Big Charlie and transported it to safety with little resistance from the animal. They were able to trace the creature's origin back to somewhere called Butcher's Block, a nearby slaughterhouse. The manager of the establishment, one Jeff Fine, and a single employee named Barney Mossman were brought in by the Foundation for questioning. Another employee, Rory Gildson, was also retrieved from his home after having called in sick to work that day. Barney Mossman, the first of the Butcher's Block employees to be interviewed, stated that SCP-4158 had been called Big Charlie since long before he had started his job at the slaughterhouse. According to his testimony, he knew nothing about where the creature had actually come from, only that it was fed hay, but would also occasionally eat anything else it could, including other cows. Since joining Butcher's Block 4 years earlier, Mossman had been told not to ask questions or to tell anyone else about SCP-4158. The morning after the huge creature had seemingly escaped, Mr. Fine had apparently angrily accused both Barney and Rory of selling him out and giving Big Charlie away to the competitors of Butcher's Block, even though they were the only slaughterhouse in the area. But Mossman was convinced that neither of them were capable of doing something like that. Rory apparently treated Big Charlie like his own child, and Fine had an even stranger relationship with the creature. Rory Gildson, the other of Fine's employees, was more helpful in shedding light on SCP-4158's origin than Barney had been. Rory explained that he and Jeff Fine had bought a pregnant cow from an unknown person 9 years earlier, considering it to be a steal, a 2 for the price of 1 bargain. However, one day without warning, the calf fell out of its mother. It wasn't born like any ordinary cow, however. According to Gildson, it had ripped through the mother cow's chest and looked disgusting. While Rory and Jeff had initially thought the calf to be dead, they discovered it had tried to get back into the barn after they hauled it outside. Their original intention had been to sell the creature off for scientific study, or failing that, to a freak show. However, after their attempts to sell the calf failed, Jeff and Rory had decided the best course of action would be to put the animal down. They had reasoned that releasing it into the wild could have negatively affected the ecosystem, so instead they took a bolt pistol and pushed it between the creature's eyes, then fired. But nothing happened. Rory tried again, but ended up breaking the gun instead. They slit the animal's throat, but it barely bled. Even butchering it on the spot while it was still alive did nothing. Fine and Gildson reduced the calf to little more than a skeleton, but it simply refused to die. The pair of them packaged the meat they had removed with the rest, hoping no one would notice or ask where it had come from. It was a few days later that Rory realized SCP-4158 was capable of regrowing whatever was cut off of it. He and his boss even tried some, and couldn't tell the difference. They had their hands on a cow that would eat anything put in front of it, and that could produce infinite meat. The Foundation probed Rory Gildson further for more information on the creature, learning that SCP-4158 was sterile and incapable of reproducing, the only one of its kind. Rory argued that the Foundation legally couldn't take Big Charlie away, that the creature was still private property. Little did he realize he was wrong. But he, just like Barney Mossman, also knew nothing about how the animal had escaped in the first place. Finally, Jeff Fine, the owner of the Butcher's Block slaughterhouse, was questioned by the Foundation. He repeated Rory's earlier story about the strange calf that had been born and how it could regenerate the flesh that was sheared off of it. Fine remarked that he considered it to be a blessing. When asked about his whereabouts on the night SCP-4158 had escaped from Butcher's Block, Jeff admitted that he had been praying, but not to God, to Big Charlie. He had apparently been doing this every night since realizing what the creature could do, viewing the animal as a provider and a savior. I just felt something when I was around him. I could tell that he wanted to make this sacrifice for us. Ever since he tried to get into the barn after we threw him out, I knew he cared for us, Fine told the Foundation. I would open his pen, take off my clothes so that I was pure before him, lay down and receive his blessings. And how would he receive those blessings? By drinking the animal's blood. Yeah, Jeff Fine was a real eccentric like that. One night, when Fine had entered the pen to perform this weird ritual, Big Charlie had escaped. But his owner was convinced that there must have been a reason for this, that the animal had some sort of goal. When the Foundation staff conducting Fine's interview dismissed this idea, the slaughterhouse owner became enraged.
How dare you question Big Charlie? He knows what's best for all of us. I'm done here. I don't need to keep answering questions like this. Let me out. I need to see Big Charlie. I need to see if he's safe.
The Foundation believes that Jeff Fine's practice of worshipping SCP-4158 was not due to any anomalous effect caused by the creature itself. None of the Foundation personnel tasked with feeding, studying, and shearing meat off of Big Charlie have displayed any similar behavior of performing abnormal religious rituals. He really was just a huge weirdo. As for the Butcher's Block slaughterhouse, Fine and the rest of his employees were given amnestics to forget Big Charlie had ever even existed, and the slaughterhouse was closed under the false pretense of a health code violation and its staff being arrested for malpractice. The one question that remains unanswered, however, is the identity of the individual that first sold Jeff Fine the cow that gave birth to SCP-4158. It just goes to show you, though, sometimes you don't know where your food is coming from. If you lived in Indiana in late 2004, who knows? You might have eaten some of Big Charlie and not even realized it. Now go check out SCP-261 Pan-Dimensional Vending Machine and SCP-426 I Am a Toaster for more SCPs that might whet your appetite.